Helena has been an accredited exercise physiologist and dietitian for the past 20 years. She's worked in a range of areas in the industry, including medical weight management, implementing a health and wellbeing program in the mines in Western Australia, and managing a boutique fitness studio.
She currently juggles her time between her three school-age daughters. Teaching at the Australian Catholic University in Nutrition and Exercise Science, is Program Director at Trek to Health, a charity supporting the mental and physical health of frontline workers, emergency services, and veterans through nature-based resilience treks, and practices as an exercise physiologist on the north side of Brisbane. Welcome back to the Lipoedema Podcast. We're your hosts, Shell
And Tiana, and today we are joined by a special guest, Helena Maguire. Helena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Are you most welcome? We're going to get straight into it. How did you first learn about lipedema?
So I first learnt about lipedema only at the start of last year. So end of 2024, 25, start of 25. So very, very new to it. And it was sort of this convergence of a whole bunch of things and a random Google search, combining it all together. This word lipedema came up and I just knew instantly that was me.
When do you think your symptoms first began? Now that you know more about it?
I can go back to being a teenager, I think. If we sort of look at symptoms themselves, maybe later in life, but lipedema, yeah, I remember a distinct time in my teenagehood, going from wearing swimmers and putting a t-shirt over the top to suddenly not wearing a t-shirt, but covering my legs and wearing board shorts down to my knees. I remember that distinct time. And then you sort of go through your life going, I just got to wear longer skirts, wear things that cover up these thighs. What's going on here? But definitely children. I think they were my... I was going to say, no, I'm sort of at the age now, I'm 44 this year. So I sort of think heading into those perimenopause years, what's going to happen next? But I've got 3 kids and I noticed that with my first one, I put on a lot of weight, but lost most of it. Second and third, though, continued to do the same, but it was much, much harder for it to drop back down afterwards. But the symptoms was around then. I started getting really heavy legs, what I thought was, swollen ankles, but I've had pain down my legs for years and pain in my hips, pain in my thighs. And you go through all of the things, physios, osteos, chiropractors, what's going on with my body, scan after scan after scan. Oh, there's nothing wrong here. And yeah, you wonder, was this all along?
Yeah. Definitely when it comes to pain. Pain can be so many different things, but I do wonder because I have had I call them growing pains, like from when I was a kid, and it feels like growing pains on your leg. And then they just never went away as an adult. And I was like, maybe that's lipedema, but sometimes it can be explained by other things. We just don't know. Pain is so difficult to diagnose.
And I think we all differently too.
And experience it differently.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's so hard to know. Is that what it is? Is that what this pain is? Yeah. And you hear lots of stories online of other people. But I think it was when I started hearing about people talking about sort of pressure pain or nervy type pain that I thought maybe my pain is that.
Yeah. So you noticed as a teenager, you said that, going to the beach, you started covering up your legs, but then it wasn't until after you had your children that you really noticed it. You said you'd had lots of scans and seen people. Had you been looking for answers for long? I
think I've been looking for answers my whole life.
No.
It's funny, around that time, I think I look back at finishing high school and I was always going to be a dentist. That was my thing for my whole life, my whole childhood. I remember even as a kid drawing little cartoon smiles, thinking I'll put them up on my wall in my clinic. And the only reason I'm not a dentist today is because the year that I graduated high school, they weren't accepting applications for a year into the School of Dentistry. So I would have wasted a year. So this is, back in the day of the book of courses, it wasn't online back then. And I remember going, well, what else am I going to do? And I shut my eyes and I pinpoint in this book. And I came across a couple of different things. One of them, I could have been a confectioner, like someone that makes lollies, because that was the first thing that came up when I pointed the finger. But the second one was this course, which was a dual degree in nutrition and human movement studies. And I sort of thought, wouldn't it be cool if if you could just know what to eat, how much exercise to do, and like manage your weight. And so I know, like, even as a 17-year-old, I'm thinking, of course, in hindsight, I'm thinking, yeah, I've got some sort of body image stuff going on here because I knew back then. But in terms of searching for actual answers, I think the fact that my whole 20-year career has been nutrition and exercise,
Yeah.
I've tried everything that's out there. I can tell you, I've tried every diet, I've tried every exercise program, I've tried every claim of things, and nothing ever worked. Even my own advice. I worked for about 10 years in medical weight loss, medical weight management, and it would always frustrate me, like, why doesn't my own advice work for me? Or these people are doing this. The worst one is when I work with like husband and wives, and the husband just has to like cut out the ears or start walking, and then boom, drop, and then the wife's there struggling. She's changing her diet, she's exercising, and I'm like, I can relate, but it's so frustrating.
Yes, so frustrating.
But it was actually, I think, Boundaries of Everything from a lipedema perspective was me. I've learned over my, professional and personal development, different things in terms of the lymphatic system. I've gone into different avenues with weight loss and all of that. Actually transitioned my own practice away from weight loss into more the non-dieting, health at every stage approach, just because I knew it wasn't, the focus of nutrition and exercise for weight loss didn't work.
Yes.
And so when I heard about lipedema, it was just like all these pieces of the puzzle of information that I knew about nutrition, about exercise, about circulation and lymphatic system. It was just like, that makes perfect sense. I completely understand what's going on here. So I guess I have an advantage over some people when they hear about lipedema and then they have to go and learn, do all of this understanding of all the potential things. To me, it was just like, I get it. But yeah, I just ended up taking it into my own hands. I can thankfully, do my own blood testing and all this sort of stuff. And I kind of got sick of asking all these professionals, what about this? What about that? I think I need to get tested for this. Or, and then, hearing, as I'm sure many of the listeners have experienced, that you ask for things, but you kind of get the brush over, like, oh, you don't need that, or that's going to cost you money. It's not necessary, or
Well, you don't fit the typical presentation for that stuff. So why would we? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I just did my own testing and got a bunch of answers that I went, well, that makes a whole lot of sense. And it all kind of converged together just to not just like lipedema, but understanding a lot of the underlying processes in the body and what things could be affected there.
It's so good that you already had that background knowledge on the body and nutrition and all of that to then put the lipedema lens through that. So sort of, working back and going, oh, okay, so this is why that didn't work for me. And but what interests me is the amount of years you've spent in the industry and hadn't heard the word lipedema.
Yeah, that pisses me off. Yeah, I think about it. It really annoys me that I've been in the industry for 20 years and I've never come across it until recently. Or if I have, it just, didn't feature into my brain. Even more so because I did, dietetics, exercise science, exercise physiology, but I also studied beauty therapy and learnt about lymphatic massage and all of that sort of stuff during beauty therapy. I later went on and I studied myotherapy, where we went even more in depth into lymphatics and all this, and it still never came up in any of this stuff. So I can really understand why a lot of health professionals don't really know or don't really understand, because even like I think back to my uni days, and I know that I remember, again, this is over 20 years ago. I remember one of my lecturers mentioning something about the lymphatic system, and it was a bit sort of poo-pooed in the way that they were talking about it. A little bit of it, that's sort of the alternative therapy. That's, stuff that's out there. Mind you, it was a long time ago, so maybe we didn't know much about it and research wasn't there. But yeah, I just think one thing I've learned in the world of academia is that there are a lot of people out there that firmly believe if there's no research on it, it doesn't exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such a shame.
It's not
So
worth knowing
limiting.
about. Yeah, or it's not true. It's just
Mm.
not worth knowing. But I've sort of always had this, what I call my alternative brain. I've always had an interest in complementary medicines and things like that. So I'm open to just about anything. If someone wants to tell me about it, I'll go, that's interesting. And I'll go look into it a little bit further to see what's actually out there about this.
A true scientist mindset.
Yes, curious.
Yeah.
Curious.
It made me think, on social media at the moment, I see, because I've got like my lymphatic page, like my lipedema page, but I also have my like personal page where the algorithm is different. So on my lipedema page, I see a lot of positive connotations towards things like vibration platforms or lymphatic massage and things like that. But then on my personal page, where it's more like PT focused muscle building and everything, they laugh and squawk at the people that use vibration platforms as part of their therapy. And I'm like, we're not using it thinking we're
Yeah.
building, muscle from it. We're using it to support our lymphatic system. But it makes people fear using those tools because it's being spoken about in such a, you're so silly if you think this is going to help you type of way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny you say that because I think the same thing. And I think over the years I've accumulated so many things in my home as I've read about them or heard about them, thinking that they'd be useful for me. So like I had a friend gifted me a vibration platform years ago, and for years it sat in the corner under my desk. I'd use it sometimes, if I'm sitting at my desk doing a lot of marking or a lot of computer work, and I'll just be like, oh, this feels nice to vibrate away. But I never really used it because you sort of thought, doesn't really work, from the perspective you're talking about. I've always had dry brushes lying around the house and, over the years collecting dry brushes or various versions, but never really consistently using them because for me, the reason for buying them back then was, will this make my cellulite better? Or, this sort of stuff. I bought a mini trampoline, a rebounder, probably like 15 years ago. And I used to do little trampoline workouts online, but again, just got out of it because I didn't lose weight. It didn't lose, didn't
that
change
was the
those
focus.
factors.
Yes.
Right, that was the focus. And even water walking and stuff like that. Like I have a flotation belt that, you can do deep water running or walking without touching the bottom. And same thing, like I was going through that for a while, but I didn't lose my thighs. My cellulite didn't get any better, all those things. So you stop doing them. But it made me realize, I didn't really have a clear motivation or a clear reason to be using those things consistently. Nothing smoothed out the skin, nothing lost weight. And it's very hard to stay motivated. It's very hard to stay consistent when you're not seeing the results you're trying to find.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah. It wasn't until I changed that focus of why I was doing things. When I learned about lipedema, it's like, oh, well, I've got a vibration thing. I've got this. And I focus more on I want to say maybe the fun of the activity or maybe rather than just the minutes or the intensity or the, what heart rate am I working at or any of those sorts of things. It was just, do I like this? Does this feel nice? And like you're saying, I can feel improvements in circulation. I can feel those sort of legs are less heavy at the end of the day, or I went through so much of my life thinking it was just me, at the end of the day, just need to put my feet up. I can't sit. I just need to go lie down or elevate. I used to just put my legs up on the kitchen table, because of that heaviness. It was after being a little bit consistent with whether it was the vibration or whether it was the occasional mini tramp or whatever I was doing. And then suddenly you sort of go, I don't have that same feeling. At the end of the day, I don't have that. I'm sitting at the table going, I don't feel like I have to put my legs up. I don't have that tightness. What's going on? And when you get those benefits, it's easier to go, I'll do my 5 minutes. I'll do my, 10, 15, whatever it is. That's all you need on those vibration things or mini tramps. Even 5 minutes is enough to feel a difference.
Yes, absolutely. The power of conservative management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's understanding, like you said, like you've done it before, but it was for weight loss.
Yeah.
But when you understand the body and what it actually the benefit of that, and you can look out for that benefit, that gives you that motivation to keep going. It's like,
That's
your legs
right.
aren't as heavy at the end of the day, and you start getting some of those, benefits through consistency. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I admit, like, it was years ago in my practice, like I stopped, especially as exercise physiology, I stopped prescribing exercise for weight loss. Instead, it was more about trying to, let's find something you enjoy, let's find what you can do, let's, obviously, not obviously, but the difference between a personal trainer and an exercise physiologist is we've got that training in health conditions and the management using exercise to treat, manage, or prevent various health metabolic conditions. And when you look at the minimum guidelines for exercise to treat things like lowering blood pressure or improving cholesterol or managing blood glucose levels, the amount of activity that shows changes in those things is so minimal compared to like
Fascinating.
national physical activity guidelines of, try to be active at least 30 to 60 minutes most days of the week, which even my brain goes, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, very hard. Yeah.
So, talking to people or talking to clients about, even if you can just do 5 minutes or, a couple of days, this sort of stuff. It took me a long time for my head to accept that for myself too.
And I
But
suppose
it made
because it was driven from aesthetic, purposes, the
That's right.
guidelines, it's like if you don't want to put on weight or keep increasing your weight in this environment where we've got packaged foods everywhere and advertising everywhere, then you probably do need to,
Bless
probably
you.
do need to exercise 30 to 60 minutes every day to be able to maintain that. Of course, with the lipedema body, it's not the case.
Not everybody can do that. And then it's just depressing. You sort of
Right.
you either get to the point where you try to do it and then hurt yourself, or try to do it
Yeah.
and it, makes things worse, and then you just don't. Whereas
Yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned the difference between an exercise physiologist and a personal trainer because I didn't know that differentiation. So that was really
Mm.
useful for me.
Yep.
So, as an exercise physiologist, how has your view on lipedema evolved? Which is different because you have lived experience, so you would have a broader understanding. But I'm just curious, in your profession, how has it evolved?
Well, yeah, just so backstepping a little bit. So, yeah, personal trainers their qualification or their education is in exercise for healthy populations.
Yep.
So
Gotcha.
they might understand health and diseases and things like that, but they're technically not qualified to work with people that have diagnosed medical conditions, unless they've potentially gone on to further things, but that's where our area is. But the world of exercise physiology is so broad. I think it's like doctors. Finding an exercise physiologist that has learnt that stuff or knows about those conditions, is willing to work with it, or has some sort of strategy for it becomes a lot narrower. You can't just go to any, just like you can't just go to any GP and say, hey, I think I've got lipedema. You really need to understand that. But yeah, I think for me, it's just emphasizing that, like what I was saying before, that difference between why is somebody exercising? Because I do, I'm work in a medical center, so I get multiple referrals for weight management, for obesity, for, all of these things. The first thing I say to my clients is, look, I can't guarantee anything. Just because you exercise doesn't mean you're going to lose weight.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm here for, and that's not the advice that I'm going to give you. What we want to find is, can we use that physical activity to help you? Can we use physical activity to make a difference? And it's interesting then, because I look at people differently. Like
Yeah.
I obviously look at people now, particularly women, and go, do you maybe have it? But
Yeah.
we all present so differently visually as well, which makes
We
it very
do,
hard.
but there's still such a distinct look about
Yeah,
lipedema. I see it
there is.
everywhere in
Yeah,
pedestrian
yeah,
life.
yeah.
And I would
That's
never
right.
go up to somebody and tell them, which is such a shame because maybe they need to know, but it's not me who's going to tell them.
No. And I guess I'm talking from that perspective that when you've got the compounding of the lipedema and obesity, it becomes a little bit of a harder one to juggle with. But I still look at it the same, because even if it's not lipedema and we're looking at weight loss, we're still looking about fat metabolism. We're looking at how your body is processing body fat and what's it doing with it. Is it stuck somewhere? Is it not circulating properly? Very, very simplistically, like fat change is maybe a 2-stage process. Your body's got to release it and then it's got to use it. And with lipedema, there's a mix in that middle. Your body might be able to release some fat, but it doesn't know how to move it or it doesn't know how to use it. And so you might be doing the right things to lose it, but it's not being released. Or you might be doing the things to release it. You're not, wrong timing's wrong to actually use it. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question of how I deal with my clients, but it's different. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is what came up for me is like you spent a lot of time developing programs and working with people in the weight loss industry. Looking back at that now, do you see people or think that there were people there that would have had lipedema and that you could have helped differently?
Absolutely. And I look back, as I said, all the women that just did everything right, followed everything to a T. And I was lucky enough at one of my previous workplaces, people would come and see me every week. And so I would be able to give them advice and suggestions and weigh them and measure them and all these sort of things on a weekly basis. A couple of things I learned from that was, one, especially as women, our bodies naturally fluctuate in weight normally. Every single day we change like 1 to 3 kilos, even just in a single day. So getting hung up on half a kilo here or there, or whether you've lost point this or point that, it's useless, because every day is changing. Every day of the week is different. Every day of the month is different. We sort of move through these weight cycles. But I'd have these clients that would be seemingly doing all the right things and just weren't changing. But, it was sort of frustrating for them, and obviously for them, but it was frustrating for me because I thought, what is going on here? I remember a distinct client years and years and years ago, like she lived out on a farm, so, rural areas. So made a lot of her own stuff, ate a lot of good foods. We trialed meal replacements with her just to, sort of take out all the questions and, this sort of stuff, and still nothing worked. And I even got down the rabbit hole because she used to, the only water they had was rainwater on their property. And I even went down the rabbit hole of like, does the acidity level of rainwater have any impact on how somebody's bodies are working? And I had no answers, but to answer your question, that's just definitely one client that I look back and I think, I bet that's her. I bet.
And pretty telling, like living on land would be up and moving, out in the sunlight all day, eating nutritious food, probably whole foods. Like if it can't work for someone like that, then it's telling.
Something's
amiss.
And it's sad. Like, it does sadden me because we all know, like, it's expensive. It's an expensive disease. It's expensive to come and see somebody like myself on a weekly basis in a scenario like that, to not have anything come from it, and I feel sad for the people, I feel sad for the people that I saw in the past, that I thought, if I'd known what I know now back then, maybe.
When we know better, we do better. And now and you also experience it. So it's so golden. We've had numerous professionals come on our podcast that also have lived experience. And I think what a gift to us to have somebody who knows what they're doing professionally, but also can understand where we're coming from as people who live with lipedema, because it is different and it's nuanced and we're not all the same, but still that extra layer of that lived experience, I think, really makes a big difference in that client and professional relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I wanted to get into exercise now. I have always loved to exercise, and I feel quite comfortable in the exercise space. So I do it at home with limited guidance and sort of thing, that's sort of my thing. But I recognize that, first of all, that's a privilege in my stage of lipedema, to have the mobility and the ability to be able to do things like that.
Mhm.
And secondly, I'm not that's not commonplace. People have to either go and get guidance, or they don't want to, they're not motivated to, it's not part of their life. So I'm really interested to hear in your profession, How do you support non-exercisers or people who feel really intimidated by it?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll go back to my own history. And, in high school, I was one of those people that on sports days, I'd dress up as the mascot. I didn't want, I didn't want to participate. I didn't want to be in the
okay.
running races or the swimming carnival. So I'll be the mascot. I'll be the one that dresses up. And so
How funny.
when I picked this course, my parents were like, where did that come from? Because like they just thought I had no interest whatsoever in, aside from playing, the occasional netball or volleyball or something like that, just for school. No interest in exercise. And I'm very much, I know myself, like you, Tiana, like I'm not dedicated like you are to exercise, but I love it. And I found what I enjoy, but for a long period of time, and I still say it to myself, I'm one of these people that needs somebody else to tell me what to do.
Yeah. Yep.
I've written myself 100 programs. I have every bit of equipment at home, of what I can, things that I can use. But I go,
It is
"Do I want
boring.
to?" Yeah,
It's
that's
so
right.
boring. Yeah.
But if I have a gym membership and I go to classes, and I can work really hard or do certain things because somebody else is telling me to do that
Yeah.
extra bit. So I get that. I get that with people. I get that understanding of what it's like to not want to exercise, not enjoy exercise. I've also obviously been through that history of trying to exercise from a weight loss perspective, even as a young person, and it not working. Like, it makes perfect sense why exercise becomes not enjoyable, because when you're going through those, whether it's, wrong advice or whatever's happened in the past where you're going through high intensity workouts or just so much that it's taking up your entire life and you've got no time for anything else. And you just burn out from it. It makes it very, very difficult. But yeah, I do say to a lot of my clients that it's a rare few that just love exercise, and just do it day in, day out. And that's the minority, not the majority of us, I
So
don't think.
true. Yeah. And so if somebody came to you and recognized in themselves that it's just not something that they like to do, and perhaps they, in our lipedema community, they're not sure about what their capability is, mobility wise or strength wise. Where do they start? How do you start that process for them to make it less intimidating?
Yeah, well, I guess, before I'd look at the lipedema end of it or the weight end of it, I would be looking at their health background and saying, is there any health conditions here that we know exercise has benefits for? And as
Yeah.
I was saying before, there's a lot of research and there's a lot of support for what's sort of the minimal effective dose. What's an amount of activity that that makes a difference to all of those metabolic conditions or gets things going. And I've simplified this, but it makes a lot of sense to me that two things. One of them is no more than 2 days without exercise,
Right.
because we get temporary benefits from exercise.
Yeah.
So temporary benefits, like while we're exercising, we're using we're using blood sugars and all this sort of stuff. Our blood pressure drops, we're doing different things that cause these temporary benefits. But most people will recognize that from the strength sort of world. Usually with strength training, you don't do it every single day. You give yourself a rest day because you've got to do that whole repair process. So from a metabolic perspective, it's similar, but we get these temporary benefits that last for about 48 to 72 hours and then they're gone. So unless we exercise again. So temporarily our body's a little bit better than it was. And then it kind of goes, why am I better? If you're not doing any more exercise, it's like, why am I better? Let's go back to where we were. But if you can give it some sort of stimulus on that, sort of 48-hour basis or 48 to 72 hours maximum, you're catching it and you're giving that little reminder to continue to work that system before it's gone back to where it was or back to your baseline. And then as you progress, you get like, okay, we'll do it again. We'll do it again. We get these cumulative benefits. So, but for me, that no more than 2 days without also works from a motivational perspective, because we all know the days where you just think, I need to exercise, but I don't want to do it today.
Mm.
Now, ordinarily that can get somebody into this mindset of beating themselves up, feeling really guilty, trying to, I really should, but they end up on the couch, and you can have a lot of negativity around that. Whereas you can flip that around to say, look, I really don't feel like it today, and that's okay. I'll need to do it tomorrow though. If I don't do it today, where's it going to go tomorrow? And then if tomorrow comes and you think the same thing, as in, where am I? Then the third day becomes a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And then on that third day, that's where I say, like, the evidence is about 10 minutes. So at least 10 minutes of exercise. My brain needs to work with 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
So if I tell myself just do 5 minutes, then one, it's easy. There's like no barrier there to go, well, that's pretty easy. 5 minutes to me is a walk to the end of my street and back.
Yeah.
At the end of my street is a beautiful path that goes away from the streets, through trees, along a little creek, but it's those few minutes to get there, right? But I think if I just walk to the end of the street and back, that's something. That's my little pat on the back for the day. So what happens most of the time is I'll get to the end of the street and I'm like, don't be stupid, keep going.
Yes,
But it took,
absolutely. It tricks you more.
yeah, it's all mind games. It's all mind games. But for people that have mobility limitations, that becomes harder, because it's not just a case of, can you do 5 minutes can be too difficult, depending on what we're talking about. So going for a 5-minute walk might be too hard, too much. So what's an alternative 5 minutes that can be done? So I have a whole bunch of, I love bed exercises, as I call them. So things that can be done lying in bed.
Yeah.
Because most people can do that, but also it's one of those things, you go through your whole day, you get into bed, get ready for bed, tuck yourself in, you think, I didn't do my exercise today. Well, I can do it now, because there's no excuse. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be getting, you don't have to be getting sweaty. You don't have to be doing all this stuff. You can still do something that benefits you and moves your body.
Yeah, I suppose like where I sort of lack knowledge is that accessible stuff that doesn't get you sweaty, that will still make a difference. Like it's sort of like, because I am able, thank goodness, I do the normal stuff. But if I would ever get an injury or not be in the right place to do something or have to make accommodations, it's those accommodations that I would really struggle with, because of that knowledge gap, that capability gap is lacking in me. Well, if I can't do my workout, then what am I supposed to do other than going for a walk? I do love walking. What someone like you could help educate and be able to put something in place to fill those gaps.
But it's also along the lines of what you're saying. It's also accepting that, because, our brains are very good at thinking all or nothing. So if I'm not doing all these things, I'm not doing it right, or I'm not doing enough because I'm not doing that. It's the same way when people sort of fall off the wagon, they get into a routine, but then something happens and they stop. To think to step straight back into what they used to do is not often doesn't work. They're constantly thinking about, this is what I used to do and this is what I need to be doing, and then they just never get back into it because it's overwhelming, and something in your life has changed for you to fall off that wagon in the first place. We need to readjust that plan. It's not just as simple as you just go straight back to what you used to do. But our brains like to think that way because we don't give it any other option to work with. It's doing all of this or I'm failing.
Yes.
And so I like to give people, what are those options in between? Here's nothing. Here's me doing absolutely nothing. What's the next best thing? So for me, that next best thing is, where's that 5 minutes every second or third day of the week? And then what's that sort of next level? It could be this or that, or this option or that option, depending on the weather, depending on your mood, depending on what you feel like working that day. Having a few separate options of exercise that take differing amounts of energy or differing amounts of time, so that your brain's got those. And then there's perfect.
Yeah.
But we're very rarely up there.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, it's I don't know if some guests have said it in before. I'm sure I've heard of some of you guests say it, but I used to work with a psychologist who had this saying, which was 80% perfect is perfect. So to me, that's when I say perfect, we've got the unrealistic 100% perfect, but then we've got 80% perfect.
Yeah.
That's an option.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, the idealistic kind of perfect. Like, calm down, everyone.
Unattainable.
It's unattainable.
And it's the same with food. You know, we know from a dieting perspective, 80% perfect is perfect. You know, that
Yes,
there's
very good.
nobody, there's 20% there that we've got to have that leeway. Otherwise, we'll go crazy.
Yeah, we have to live. Food is
I've
tough.
always said, I think I follow, I don't practice as a dietitian at the moment. I've sort of taken a leave for the last year or so. I just mainly do the exercise physiology and basic nutrition. But as an actual dietitian, I'm still weighing up my future with that career. But I've always said throughout my whole career, I'm like, food doesn't exist to say no thank you to.
Oh, I've never heard that. It's so true.
Yeah, food doesn't exist for that reason. You can't just, no, thank you. No, I can't have that. Food's there for a reason. You know, food is comfort, it's enjoyment, it's family, it's social, it's so many factors. So yeah, to think of it as all the things you can't do, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's so true. We could vibe about food for a long time, but I'm gonna ask you a practical question before Shell goes into our very last question, which is kind of reflective. But as an exercise physiologist, where can the lipedema community find you?
So I work in a medical centre on Brisbane's north side, Gympie Road Medical Centre, and I have a website which is hmhealth.com.au. It's very simple, and I will 100% admit that I'm terrible with social media. So I don't tend to use it. I have a Facebook page. I don't know if I've ever created an Instagram page, but I don't use Instagram, so I wouldn't know if I have a page. So I can be contacted through my Facebook page. I can be contacted through my web page. But at the medical centre I work with, then I accept chronic disease care plans and
And do you do telehealth as well, Helena?
I don't do telehealth. No, I
Okay.
probably could. But I haven't worked out how to quite do that exercise-wise over the phone. But yeah, I do bulk billing for care plans and things like that. But I also see private patients here. I do, which was probably back in the introduction, also work for a charity that does trek-based mental health programs. So if any of the listeners are in frontline work of police, veterans, ambulance, fireys, any of those sorts of things, I work out of the Gap right next to the Enoggera Reservoir for that one. And so people can see me there as well.
We'll pop your website and your Facebook details in our show notes and so that people can get in touch with you.
Sounds
Fabulous.
good.
All right, our last question. If you could go back and give your younger self a pep talk, what would you tell her?
My younger self wasted so much money on every fat loss, cellulite, diet, exercise program, all those things. So biggest advice I would give myself is to don't waste your money on fat loss treatments. I'll call it that. None of them work for me. None of them will work for you. I can't say don't waste your time on diets, because I think diets, that's a whole other discussion, but diets, whatever that word conjures up to people, means different things. To me, diet just means what do you eat. But following structured diets, you learn something from them.
Yeah,
Whether even if that's you learn.
It's experimental.
It's experimental. So personally and professionally, I've learned something from them. If anything, you learn what doesn't work for you. So I can't say don't waste your time on that. But I would say the real restrictive stuff, the real restrictive plans, the 1,000-calorie diets, can't have any of this other stuff and must follow, just have shakes and nothing else, all of that. I shouldn't have done those, I think. But again, part of me is also appreciative of that experience. Like I have the experience of those things that helps me advise clients as to whether it works or not, or whether it might be something that works for them. It may not have worked for me, but my younger self, save your money.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
$2,500 suction thing up and down your leg, nah, doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I know. So hard. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Helena, for joining us today. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll hopefully speak to you another time and vibe about some of the other things like diet.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of little nutshells of information in here, so I'm more than happy to do that.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Lipedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced in this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shelley and Tiana from the Lipoedema Podcast. Until our next episode, bye for now.